Welcome to the SDG Media Zone at South by Southwest in Austin, sponsored by SAP. This morning's theme is the future of conscious fashion, and our panel is called Collaboration, the Key to a Sustainable Future. My name is Lance Gould, and I'm the editorial director of Earth's Call, and as the moderator of this panel, I apparently get the comfy chair. With me today are, to my left, are Dr. Paul Swan, who is technical advisor for two nonprofits. One is Woolmark out of Sydney, and the other is the International Wool Textile Organization based out of Brussels. Then we have Charney Magri, who is partner of Do Epic Good and director of Catwalk to Creation. To her left, we have Ramzi Moutran, founder of Do Epic Shit and director of Catwalk to Creation. And we haven't even gotten started. We've already had our first bleep. And then to his left, we have Michael Colovos, who is the co-founder of Colovos. There are less than 8 billion people in the world, and yet every year the fashion industry creates 150 billion garments of clothing. Much of that clothing is made of synthetic materials that not only contain dangerous toxins, but every time they are washed will bleed microplastics into the oceans. The fashion industry is one of the biggest polluters globally. This is especially worrisome because a new IPCC report found that we have just 12 years to halt the rise of global temperatures, or we could be facing irreversible catastrophe. So we pretty much need the public to know about the SDGs. And that is the theme, that and collaboration are the themes of today's panel. No one company can make planet-saving changes alone. How can we work together to make changes up and down the supply chain and generate awareness of the SDGs so that we can take more immediate action? So my first question is to everybody, and we'll just go in order. We'll start with Charney, actually. I'd like to ask each panelist to share what is most worrisome to you about the effect that the fashion industry is having on our environment. Charney, take it away.
This is a really big question, and it's not probably something I can answer in 45 minutes or in 2 minutes, but I'm going to give it a go. When we were filming Catwalk to Creation, one of the statistics that came up that's really stuck with me through one of the the interviews, that 83% of all of our water, and this is tap water, this is pond water, this is rainwater and bottled water, has plastic microfibers in it. And a third of that problem is coming from the fashion industry. And a lot of people that I talk to tell me, whether they're in fashion or not, that their response is, well, I'm not in fashion, so it doesn't really apply to me. Well, the fact is that you are in fashion because otherwise you'd be standing around naked. So we all have a responsibility.
That'll be our second bleep of the day.
So we all have a responsibility. We just need to recognize what our responsibility is.
Ramzi, do you want to follow up on that?
Charney said it really well. It's the fashion industry it touches every single person on the planet. Everyone, like she said, has to wear clothes and is, in one way or another, contributing towards it. The amount of plastics and fibers that are in the construction of almost all clothing nowadays, it's unimaginable how much damage it's doing, because not so much the classic clothing that we're probably wearing today, but almost all the sports clothing, all the new age clothing, it's all got plastic-based fibers in it, and even if it looks like it's a healthy, nice piece of clothing, it's actually causing so much damage every time it's washed. And this never, ever goes away. It's not like all the other sustainable fibers that are optional out there, which eventually are from the earth and will go back to the earth. This stuff never, ever, ever goes away. And it's that simple idea that there is actually more plastics in the oceans than there is going to be fish soon. It is everywhere, and Charney said it through the whole ecosystem of the planet. So the fact that I have plastic inside of me right now because of this, because ironically you're wearing it, it's being washed and it goes back into you. Plus, it's actually not a very good fiber. It's quite ironic. It's taken over the world, and it's just not a very good fiber to be wearing. Every time I go to the gym, it just stinks afterwards. So it is funny that the fashion industry is addicted to it in one way or another. So that was the biggest learning I had while making the film, is how much the industry is obsessed with this fiber.
Well, to follow up on that, and the same question to Michael, but Michael and Paul are both representing companies or brands that are working to reverse that or to find alternatives to that. So Michael, do you want to answer the same question, but just I want to set up your perspective?
Yeah, from a business owner that's in the business of creating clothing, my biggest worry is two things: is access to technology that's affordable for my company to be able to make a positive impact on the environment, and also the ability to communicate that information to my consumer in a way that they are not feeling sort of turned away from fashion, but embracing what we're giving, producing, and also being aware that they are making conscious choices to buy clothing that is ethically and sustainably made.
The thing that worries me the most is that we've got a lot of work to do to change the trends. We do surveys of what's in consumer wardrobes, and we're just finishing the most recent global survey in 8 markets. On average, the average male consumer has about 118 garments in their wardrobe. That's up from the last survey we did 5 years earlier.
And that includes everything from underwear to socks.
That's everything. And this might surprise you, but women have more garments than men. If you, not hugely, but the trend is that we're actually buying more, but we're not keeping them long. It's becoming more of a throwaway. So the problem's getting worse. The other thing that worries me is a lot of the new consumers that we're adding don't live in places like the US of A. They actually live in emerging economies in Asia. They don't have the disposable income to be able to buy biodegradable natural fibres like I'm wearing, or Michael that you use. So we've got a lot of work to do to change the momentum, and we have to own up, and the industry's got to grow up, is my view.
And just a quick follow-up there, just for the audience watching online. The reason that men having more garments per individual than they have in the past is worrisome. Why?
It's basically it's more consumption. It's a throwaway society. It's fast fashion. The business model has changed. It's from when I was like my father had suits that lasted 20 years when he worked in the industry. He was very proud of his Florsham shoes that he had for like 10 or 15 years. But we've lost a lot of focus on the recycle, reuse, and also keeping garments a long time. The people want to keep up with fashion, and fashion is transient. And so things get purchased, they get worn, and they get chucked. And so that's one of the things that needs to become fashionable is biodegradability, recyclability.
I think if I can just add on to that, a really scary statistic is that there's 30 times the Empire State Building in America alone that gets put into landfill every year, and that's just in the United States. Yeah. So if you think of it on a global level, on scale, what's actually happening, I mean, it's incredible the amount of damage that we're doing.
That is amazing, and that's something related to some of the other SDGs, especially number 17, partnerships, and a few of the others. In terms of when we have refugee crises and we're not able to find clothes for these individuals, the fact that we are throwing away in landfills an Empire State Building's worth every year is just mind-blowing. And speaking of collaboration, this leads me to my next question, Ramzi. Like that segue? Today's panel is called Collaboration, the Key to a Sustainable Future. And the video series that you and Charney have produced, Catwalk to Creation, is a collaboration with a lot of different perspectives, from designers to brands to factory workers. What is the common ground among that collaboration that all of these individuals and groups work with? And what can we see in terms of promise for a sustainable future from your film?
Yeah, so the film was all about following a sustainable garment that a designer has made from Catwalk, which we use as a city streets, to Creation, which is where it came from. And we had two garments. One was provided by Bodis, which is a wool-based garment. And the other one was Mara Hoffman jacket, which came from Lensing Group, which is like Refibra material. And what we did is we shot these ladies in London, and then we followed them, and we took them with us to where the actual fabric was made and created. The two simple ideas. One is the theory of the film is designed for a lifetime, not a season. So we're trying to make sustainable fashion look sexy and cool and be interesting and be nice and something people want to be. Because it used to be seen as a compromise. It used to be seen as I'm taking something back and I'm compromising on quality so I can be sustainable. It's actually flipping around now. It's becoming the cool fabric. It's becoming the really sexy thing to work with. Not only on the story level, but also on how it looks and how it drapes on you and how it fits. So that was the main cause of it. But the way we did it with collaboration, and it happened naturally through the process of designing the film, was we realized how much designers rely on the supply chain and working with, let's say, Woolmark or anyone else, where they come to them with a challenge and they work with them to find a great solution. Because the solution isn't always on Google. You can't just Google sustainable fiber and find it, you know? And it's actually quite a complicated industry to find your way around where the best solutions are. So you have to go and create these connections and create these unexpected partnerships. I mean, Mara Hoffman works a lot with Lensing Group to find the right fabric that gives them the right touch. And there's multiple of these. And we realized as we were making it, there's so much information we've been gathering. So we actually made a mini documentary series on the back of it, talking about the catwalk to creation, talking about the flow of information and how designers have to work with suppliers, have to work with end suppliers, have to work with everyone along the way, even communicators like us and brands to talk about it. And that collaboration, first of all, it's really cool because you get to work with really cool people and you discover some new things, which is always great. I mean, I'm not the most fashionable person in the world and I'm starting to learn it, so it's quite cool. But also but it's also great because you get to find all these amazing technologies. You know, I've just heard recently about like spiderweb fabric. It's like, okay, that sounds interesting. What are we going to do with that next? And it's just nice. And the more you can share it with the public so they care, which is what my job is. I take something that's quite complicated and show it to the public in a simple, interesting way that they can they can take it in. And I think that's the basic around what we've done with Catwalk to Creation, is trying to show it.
I just wanted to jump in because you brought up a few points that relate to what we did with Woolmark. And we just created a Colovos Woolmark collection. And one of the great, amazing parts of that, aspects of that, was being able to work with scientists like Paul and Amanda Parks, all the way from the farm to our product. And the amount of information that we got, and it was a collaborative process the entire way, but really, working with mills that were powering their plants with solar power to offset their carbon footprint, working with mills that are, joining the Greenpeace detox program to eliminate harmful chemicals from the dye process. I was able to create a collection that looked, in my opinion, very modern. It didn't look like a traditional sustainable or homegrown collection, but really fashion collection that could sit anywhere, and hopefully will. But by the way, it's also organic, and it's also was made in factories that were paying fair wages. And not harmful to the environment. And through that process as well, we were introduced to a company in China that is taking end-of-life garments, reducing them back to a fiber state using heat, steam, and citrus. So it's a non-toxic process where I'm able to take post-production fibers and make new fabrics, and I can also take end-of-life garments back from the consumers that buy them, give them a credit towards new purchases, and then create new fabrics. So what we're doing with that is then donating any proceeds from those garments back into charities that are helping to clean up the planet.
It's so encouraging to hear, and from what you're saying, and from what we've come to realize, is that it's really up and down the supply chain is the spirit of this sustainable movement. And Paul, in terms of the microfibers issue is so disturbing. We can't even begin to fathom what consequences the proliferation of these plastics in the ocean will have on marine life, on the food chain, and on the climate crisis. And 1/3 of those microfibers, as Charney mentioned in her opening, come from the fashion industry. You're on the science and research side of the business, and Woolmark brands use natural fibers. Tell us about the critical research that you're doing and why natural fibers are so important.
It's a huge issue, as you mentioned. And there's a lot of effort going into, firstly, measuring the problem. If you turn the clock back 5 years, no one was talking about it. Okay, so it's exploded in science. I do a lot of work in what we call life cycle analysis, which is like the currency for trading sustainability. And it underpins a lot of eco-labels. But there aren't impact categories that have been agreed on yet for things like microplastic pollution. But the thing underneath all this complexity, the key thing, as I was saying to Michael earlier, at the end of the day, the natural fibres, and wool's only one of the natural fibres, but it's been what nature chose to clothe our bodies with over the millennia. It's in whale baleen, it's in fish, it's a natural structural protein. And over the millennia, nature has evolved ways to recycle it. So there's bacteria, there's fungi, there's enzymes that can break it down and return, so it becomes a foodstuff. For a lot of the plastics that we've now surrounded ourselves with and we wrap ourselves in, they're non-biodegradable. Nature has not worked out a way to make it into a foodstuff. So this becomes, I think for fashion designers, and I think for consumers too, this will become a very important question. Is this actually made of is this product I'm wearing made from a biodegradable product? Because if it's not, it's going to what we call bioaccumulate. It's going to progress it like plastics. They break down into smaller and smaller particles. But we're probably breathing them in. There's a lot of research going into nanoplastics. So, and there's a lot we don't know. And science, unfortunately, it's like the bomb's gone off and the scientists are madly scrambling trying to disentangle the issue. But one of the things that happens when these sorts of crises occur is there's a lot of innovation. Also, consumers nowadays have access. They're demanding information. Consumers are knowledge hungry. It's one of the challenges for the brands, and that's why your education piece is so important. Is a lot of what we need to do to collaborate is about sharing knowledge. Like you were talking about the traceability story. How does a New York fashion designer find out about where to get the right fibre or find out about the technical stuff that's going on when so much is new and so much is happening? So it's a massive issue. We're doing a lot that we can do in terms of science. We do consumer garment wardrobe audits. So we're doing a lot of work to try and track how many garments we purchase, how people care for them. Are they biodegradable? What's the impact? What's our footprint on the industry? Mm-hmm. So the textile industry has to take ownership of this. And that's why I mentioned before, that's like we have to grow up about some of these issues and leave the greenwash for somebody else. Get on and do substantive stuff.
Well, I'm going to segue from your comment about what does a fashion designer in New York do about this to ask a fashion designer in New York the next question, which is, Michael, denim is one of the worst offenders vis-a-vis pollution. Your company, Colovos, in addition to making award-winning women's wear, also makes a sustainable denim. So will you tell us about how your company honors the SDGs, particularly number 12, SDG number 12, responsible consumption and production, while still producing a luxury product?
Well, a lot of that comes down to sourcing the materials and working with suppliers that are honoring those same sustainable commitments. Because it's one thing for our company to make these decisions, but we have to choose to partner with companies that as well are all the way through the supply chain. So we are working with denim manufacturers that are denim mills that are working with organic cottons, buying small lots. There's a lot of technology right now around being able to produce cotton with less water, less waste, and we're working with people that are aligned with those principles. And going back to what Paul said as well about the Australian merino wool. I found it very interesting being part of the Woolmark, looking at how the farmers were working with the government to really identify regions in Australia where the feed for the sheep, trying to develop feed that works in those climates. I think that technology could also be brought into the cotton industry, and I think it's that whole collaboration, the whole idea of sharing information across industries, and also, not just, we're looking at this as a fashion problem, but, there's a lot of industries that use cotton, a lot of industries that use merino wools, and if we were able to share that information across industries, we'll be able to scale the technology much faster and make it much more affordable for, a small company like me to be able to tap into these technologies.
and this is clearly something the public is interested in, and I think this is something that Charney tapped into in a recent blog post of hers. I want to bring that to your attention. Charney, you observed one fashion brand make a statement about steps that they were taking to protect the environment, and you were suspicious that what they were doing was actually greenwashing, and you were incensed by this, and you wrote a blog about it, and it went viral. So there's definitely an audience hungry for this kind of information about keeping it real. So tell us a little bit about that moment, the blog, and your reaction to it.
Yeah, sure. So it was actually a post on Instagram, but I woke up on a weekend. No, it's fine. Woke up on a Saturday morning, and I read this post that a fast fashion brand had put up, declaring that they would no longer use wool in any of their product line. Now, this fast fashion brand can't afford even to use wool in their product lines, let alone even declare that not going to use it. So it was a classic case of greenwashing, and I was completely livid because the reason behind it was for animal welfare and making sure that the animal's being treated right, which is, one conversation to be had. But to actually use their platform to inform their their clients or their customer base that, they're going to stand up and use their position as a power to do something that they don't even have anything to do with is just completely unbelievable. And it was just, it made me so mad to see that they would use their position of power, for not for a force for good, for completely brainwashing all of their consumers. So I wrote a post about it, and it did go viral. And 24 hours later, they retracted their comment. But one thing that really annoyed me was that, they didn't come back and actually educate the consumer about what benefits of wool have, or a natural fibre. It was just a blatant, try and sort of a PR marketing scam.
It's it's an interesting challenge for the natural fibre industries, particularly the ones like wool. Farmers tend not to shout from the rooftops how sustainable they are. By and large, they get on with the job, and what they actually measure themselves by, if you probe them for about what really matters or what makes them proud, it's that they've handed the farm over to their kids or their grandkids in better shape than they found it. There's that real custodial thing. But as I say, they tend not to shout that from the rooftops. That's why the sort of collaboration approach is so important. Not many people realise that with Woolmark, and behind what we've done with in supporting the people like Michael, is there are 27,000 wool growers who are shareholders of the company I work for. They voluntarily pay a levy on the value of their wool, which the government collects, and the government matches the R&D dollars and gives it to the industry to invest. So that's, in essence, a partnership. That's the wool growers saying, hey, we need help to create a sustainable future for our business. We can't do it ourselves. And so they invest in the R&D. And it's been a privilege. My career, biggest part of my career has been involved in the R&D side of things, investing those funds. And the growers paid for contributed to the uni course that I did, and they paid for my postgrad and my postdoc fellowship and all those things. Incredibly generous, but they fly under the radar. They don't trumpet it. But they are desperately interested also to know what you want. I'm sure when you visited the farms, they would have loved telling you about what they're doing, but they wanted to know what you need. How can they work with you? Because it takes years to change a farm. It takes years to change a flock. So this thing about a knowledge partnership is critical for the future of this industry.
I think that's what's so wonderful about the SDGs as well, is they're very malleable. There are 17 of them, but they really do cover everything under the social good umbrella, and that includes public-private partnerships and with an eye on R&D in the fashion industry. I mean, that is really covered by SDG 17. I think that's really worth trumpeting from the rooftops of the farmers' barns.
Absolutely. I mean, the company, we've looked at it, I think there are 8 or 9 of the SDGs we align with or make investments that go in that space. But you've got to remember Australia is one country. There are 88 countries around the world that have sheep. Okay, there's about 2 billion tonnes of it produced, 2 million tonnes of it produced each year. A big part of what we can do also is help share our knowledge with other countries that don't have the resources. So one thing we do through IWTO, sorry to butt in, but we match dollar for dollar or euro for euro contributions to R&D from other countries in our space. So that's what I do through the IWTO. And that's a really powerful thing that allows countries like, let's say, Uruguay or South Africa or even the Falkland Islands, which is can put a bit of money on the table and get it matched to do something that's important. So it's implicit in recognising the importance of these goals, which is about a level playing field or a fair go, is sharing knowledge.
And on following up on what you were talking about in terms of all of the research being done on sheep and things of that nature, just to address this, are there negative impacts that sheep would have or other materials that for which we rely on animals to the environment?
Look, definitely. All the industries, all production systems have impacts. By and large, farmers are concerned. They're good custodians, as I say, and they don't shout about it, but they try and manage the place to hand it to the next generation. But I know there, like in Australia at the moment, we're suffering a terrible drought in the whole eastern seaboard. There's parts of Western Australia that's in drought. Farmers have to destock. They have to get the sheep off the land because if there's no grass, then you can get erosion. But by and large, farmers do those sorts of things. So farmers manage for the next generation. In wool processing, we've got issues that there's chemistry, there's old chemistry that's got to be changed. We invest in those things. So there's investments in new washability treatments. There's investments in new finishing treatments. There's a whole... As the world evolves, we have to evolve with it, and we have to constantly improve and invest in the future. All of the natural fibres have their own challenges, just as synthetic fibres have challenges. The big consolation for us, Lance, is that our fibres, they're biogenic, they're natural, they are recycled, they're part of the natural carbon cycle, so they're made of recycled carbon. At the end of their life, they're biodegradable. We haven't introduced carbon that nature stored under the soil millions of years ago. We haven't taken that and pumped it in the atmosphere, which is what happens. So our footprint is different to that. We have impacts, but the key thing is that you own up and you invest in the solutions.
That makes so much sense. You just answered my next question, which is terrific. No, that's terrific. And so I'm just going to skip ahead to ask the other panelists, what are you each doing with your own individual companies to walk the walk and support the SDGs, and promote the SDGs as well? Charney, why don't you start, Charney?
So one of the things that we worked on with Catwalk was collaboration, and that was collaboration throughout everyone, with the partners that came on board, right through to anyone who touched the project. It was key for us to actually prove within Catwalk, the partners that came on board came from very different industries. So we had brands, we had a company, we had an NGO, et cetera, all with very different ROIs, all with very different visions and what they wanted to get out of the actual project. If we could prove that we were able to do it with our project, then it was, it was the base to be able to launch for everyone else to say, look, if we can do it, then you can do it as well, no matter what industry you're in. And that doesn't matter, like you were saying before, it doesn't matter if it's just fashion, it's across the board. It can be in accounting firms, it could be in law firms, it could be anywhere. Collaboration is key, and that's the only way that we're going to make change, the only way.
Yeah, just expanding on that a bit is... The collaboration goes even beyond just the one project we work on. I think the whole idea that one company now has to have all its own solutions is unrealistic. It's too much time, and too much time is wasted of everyone doing the same thing over and over and over again and having micro different solutions for it. Maybe there's this one guy who's researching how to make denim disposable. Another guy's doing it as well. Another guy's doing it as well. And there's 5 of them doing it, which is just a waste of time, and we don't have time anymore. So this idea of collaboration is almost like a leapfrog to a solution. And it's also nicer because you think of other people who have got other solutions you never thought about. We can't rely on the top 20, 30 biggest companies in the world to have all these solutions. You need to go to the small research development team in Tokyo, or the research development team somewhere else that might have a solution for you that you never expected, but you're going to save years of research and wasting time of trying to find your own solution. I mean, we do the same when it comes to communication and advertising, you know? You no longer have this huge, I mean, my agency doesn't have a huge team of people. We go and bring the right person in for the job because it saves you time, saves you money, and you do have a better product in the end. And it's the same across all of it. And that's fundamentally what the SDG is all about. It's about highlighting all the different options, all the different possible solutions, and then asking you, if you don't know how to do it, go and find someone who can. I mean, I almost see it as almost like the ultimate database of solutions, you know, and that's what the UN fundamentally is as well. It's this idea of that bring all the people together, and if I can't solve it, he might be able to, or she might be able to, or they might be able to, and you bring them together and you collaborate to find the things. And the only one I think I would love to see more of is you don't see it as countries anymore. One best thing about brands is they don't see borders. You know, they go across the whole world, and I think that's the challenge is because countries have different challenges with each other. Brands don't. Brands go across borders just in trucks and they don't care where they get it from. And they've solved the supply chain much better. So if everyone starts working more like a brand, this idea that we don't see borders, we don't see countries, we just work with the best people in the planet to do, then I think it's going to be in a better space.
For me, I'm making decisions with my money, just like I hope that our consumers do with choices that they make on what kinds of clothes that they want to buy. We're choosing to work with mills and factories that are maybe spending a little bit more money, especially in terms of labor, and we are also investing in education because we, as a brand, I'm the person that is next in line to the consumer. So I'm the one that should be taking that information about the farmers and shouting that from the rooftop and educating people as to what is actually happening, on all levels of my supply chain and being transparent. So if I'm doing something wrong, I want to be called out on it, and I also want to work with the people that are calling out and policing to find solutions. If I'm a company that's not doing something correctly, I'd like to find a way to do something better. And I think that with this type of technology, when it comes to sustainability, just in general, designers tend to be a little bit guarded about their resources because it sort of gives you an edge over somebody else if you're able to do something that's new and I find that with sustainability, it's completely different. It's something that from a lot of different designers that I typically wouldn't, work with. I'm getting information. I'm sharing information with people, and I'm happy to share my own information.
That's a really cool point, actually.
Yeah, it is actually really a great thing when somebody offers you up information, and it's for a good cause. I mean, we're all here, it's no joke. It's a ticking clock, and we need to address this, and we need to do it, to your point, and as quick as possible.
Yeah. You're all experts with the front row seat on fashion innovation. What are some of the exciting developments that you're finding as disruptive solutions or alternatives to synthetics? One that I've read about is the combination of okra DNA and jellyfish DNA being synthesized into a material that will dissolve in oceans within 50 years, and that was incredibly exciting to me. And Ramzi, you mentioned something we were discussing before about spider DNA, but why don't you each talk about one new innovation that you've heard that really excites you? And maybe not necessarily with your own company, but just something that really has you excited.
As a wool person, I'm not particularly excited by the okra and octopus example, but I'm happy for them.
You're more land-based.
I'm happy for them.
Okra's land.
But look, there's in our industry, there's some developments that are happening where classes of chemicals that have been used in the past are going to be able to be phased out. So that's some developments with washability. But the main one I wanted to mention across all industries is what they call the ferment economy, which is...
Ferment?
Yeah, ferment economy, which is basically using bacterial or microbial protein to produce fibres. But it's the key thing there is that you are potentially able to use organic wastes, trashes, those sorts of things, and give it a really important purpose. So that to me will be the game changer, and there's a lot of chemistry that's occurring. Those fibres will never be as good as merino, particularly Australian merino. That goes without saying. But what it means is that there's a whole new class of innovation coming through in terms of how we make the fibre, and that's going to change the game.
Charney?
I've got a lot. I don't know if I can narrow it down to one. I mean, there's the typical, not typical, but the kind of more well-known one of pineapple leather that's come out a little while ago. But then you're looking into things like apple leather, growing fur in laboratories. There's even one girl who's been found and funded and supported by a big holding company who's actually got a jacket that is now a living creature, like a plant, and you treat it like a plant. So you spray it, and you look after it, and you hang it up, and it actually emits... it takes in carbon dioxide and gives out oxygen. So it's almost like it's a living creature.
It's incredible.
Yeah, really good one. There was, there's so many. There was actually one that I saw at an event a few weeks back where a girl was actually experimenting and looking into how human sweat or perspiration can be crystallized and then made into something in the fashion industry. So there's some really quite... yeah, certainly not wool-oriented solutions.
That in your drink.
But there's some really, really innovative... I mean, that's the epitome of innovation for me. But
If okra DNA didn't get him, human sweat's not going to get him.
yeah, so there's some really cool things that are coming out. And it's exciting. It's really exciting.
Now, for me, actually, it's a technology, and not so much in the fabric, but in the traceability. There's a lot of great technology and stuff we're hearing about now, where it's RFID technology, so you can actually trace a garment throughout its whole life cycle, and you know when to take it out of circulation and to degrade it at the right time. Because the problem is, because it's fast fashion and this idea that everything's constantly going out to landfills, you need to understand of how to make a garment that can be destructed properly. How to use the right kind of buttons, how to use the right kind of zips, and how to build it so it can be taken apart easier and more effectively. But that also needs to understand that you have to trace it, so you can actually know where the fabric comes from and what kind of fabric's in it, so you know how to recycle that better. And there is technology which is now without batteries, without anything, where it's hidden in the seams or in the fabric itself. You could trace it for its whole life. Wow. So no longer is a company responsible for it just from its doorways out, but now the customer is going to be empowered to understand its own life cycle of its own garments. And imagine if your cupboards eventually could tell you this garment needs to be recycled now. You've worn it enough. It's now degrading too much, and the plastic or whatever is in it is more destructive. It'd be so cool if your cupboard could tell you that, and that's in theory where it's going to go to.
It is amazing.
Which could be really quite nice and quite cool.
Yeah, I think that's perfect, and actually we're using that technology in our garments as well. It started out as RFC codes, but it's evolving into not synthetics, but it's evolving into fibers that can be woven into the garment. So that's a way of communication, from the beginning of life, point of purchase to the end of life. And for me, the biggest kind of exciting. I mean, there are so many. I agree with what everybody said, but the one thing I'm really interested in right now is is what to do at the end of life cycle, how to return it and bring it back into life. So, from starting with design, my goal is to design something that somebody wants to wear over and over again. It's not sort of a trendy thing that can be worn one season or for one occasion. So, I want to be able to make things that people want to wear for many, many years that feel modern, and then when it is time to recycle, I can return it back into new garments. So,
in Charney and Ramzi's film Catwalk to Creation, we meet Ruchika Sakdeva, the designer behind Bodice, a label that aims to make clothes that last beyond a season, as she says in the film, which I thought was such a great concept. If we think beyond the idea of season, how much? And this is a question this is a question aimed at folks watching. How much responsibility falls on the consumer? Do shoppers bear some responsibility for buying more and more clothes and clothes that they don't need? And is this something that we need to wake them up to?
I'll answer that if you like. I think the responsibility falls not only on the consumers but the brands and also legislation. It's a 3-point triangle here. But one of the things with Catwalk, what we tried to do was really to raise awareness, because without that education and without being empowered by that, they don't know, and no one knows, so no one can really do anything. So you need to break in first, make sure people understand what's happening, and then start to make the change.
I completely agree. Ultimately, the consumers need to make informed decisions, but also be motivated to take the right actions. Okay, and so the brands and retailers have a huge impact, even the point of sale staff, in terms of what they understand, what features they can point to. Because we really do need to empower the consumer to make the right decisions. And the responsibility, I think, largely comes back to the people who put the garments on the shelf and get paid for it.
Let me play devil's advocate for a second. If you're a brand and you're being told to sell less, what would motivate you to honor that? Obviously, you want to do the right thing for the planet. You don't want to use poisonous toxins in your clothes. You don't want them to fall apart into microplastics and pollute the oceans. But what motivates you to sell less?
Well, you can. There's because it's the right thing to do, and because you're making clothes that have a certain level of integrity. And if you're not a brand that has integrity, then you should shut your doors right now. And I think that it's possible to grow a moderately sized label and still employ plenty of people, take care of their families, take care of your family, and have plenty of money to pass through the supply chain, which I'm shocked to see, many of the biggest corporations don't do. Most of that company money goes to the CEOs and does not into the shareholders and doesn't take into account the people all of the way through the supply chain. But I think that that's what would motivate me, is to be able to maintain a brand that you can reach a certain point. It's not about growing every single season, but staying in business and having a loyal customer base. You don't have to create more. And part of that technology, embedded in the garments is a way to teach the consumer.
That's an excellent point. I think we have time for one last question. Do we have time? One new initiative that I'm currently involved in is a new foundation called Earth's Call, which is committing $50 million to the MacArthur Foundation's Lever for Change to specifically fight the climate crisis. And maybe we have time for lightning round because we're running out of time, but leave us with one inspiring story that gives you hope for the future. Let's start with Michael.
Well, there's so many. I think just where technology is going and the fact that that we have the chance to commoditize some really amazing technologies that will benefit the planet. So people will be happy to make money by doing good.
No, I think for me it's on our journey making the film is meeting some pretty amazing designers, and they're the ones guiding it and leading it. Because if you make it in that way, that's what the customers want. Like Michael's saying, is they are the closest to the customer. They are kind of guiding the trend. So you make it sustainable. You make it to be recyclable. That's what they're going to want, because that's what eventually the models are going to be wearing, and the influencers are going to be wearing, and that's what everyone's going to want to wear. So you're making it cool. You're making it sexy, you're making it interesting. And then it's all of these smart gentlemen's jobs to go and figure out how to do that and keep the next generation of technology and fibers coming through the system to give him the stuff to play with so that they can look cool wearing it.
You must watch their film, by the way, Catwalk to Creation, because there are so many inspiring stories in it. But Charney, please.
I think that's probably my point, is that most people that have seen the film or are not interested or not in the fashion industry have actually come away and said, wow, I had no idea. And that inspiring conversation that follows is enough to say, okay, people are ready for this.
You have the final word, Paul.
Look, I guess what inspires me is the next generation of consumers coming through, those millennials, because they're knowledge hungry, they can find out, and also they are increasingly making ethical choices. They want to make a difference, okay? And so that's a huge opportunity for the global textile industry, for brands and retailers, for people that influence thought. because people can find out, and if to the extent that we educate them well and show them how to source the right things, they will act. They will invest in these products and services that are sustainable because they've got that ethical motivation. And ultimately, that's basically where salvation lies, because they will change. They will make the change that a lot of people won't.
That's wonderful. Well, thank you all so much. This has been very inspiring, and I feel motivated to go out and buy some sustainable clothes. And thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.